Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kate.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show today because we haven't probably touched on this area about work, especially as we're sort of hitting, perimenopause and menopause and aging. And I think it's a really big topic for women, but for everybody in general that, maybe are looking at career transitions or winding up their career or just navigating the workforce during this time. So before we sort of dive into that, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
So my name is Wendy Alexander, and I'm the founder and principal writer at Happy Career Hub. And the journey for me into the career coaching space started when I was in a dilemma, probably 7 years ago. My relationship had ended. I was pregnant at the time, 4 months pregnant, and I had to find a way to support myself and my daughter because her father walked away without any kind of financial support or anything like that. So it was kind of what I call my rock bottom life. And I was like, I need to find a way to support this baby. So the foremost thought in my mind was, how do I make more money? That was all I cared about, was how do I make more money to be able to support this child? And I was also obviously a few months later going on maternity leave. So there was a lot of panic. There was a lot of stress. And so apart from going for counseling to get my headspace sorted out, I had to devise a strategy. Like in my head, it was, I need $20,000 more just to be able to clear the debt that had been caused by the end of that relationship, where the house sold at a loss and so on, and to be able to start a life for my daughter and I. Yeah, and so what I ended up doing was getting in touch with a couple of recruiters and getting in touch with hiring managers. And I started to build these relationships with these people. And the sole aim was to pick their brains to find out how I could improve my career prospects. And look, back then, they were fairly generous. People gave me tips and tricks, but I also used my love of words. So I'm a wordsmith, always have been, love writing. Use my love of words to start transforming my own resume. And then took the tips that were given to me by the recruiters and the hiring people and started to develop a framework. And I was at this consistently for 6 months after my daughter was born. So she was an infant, obviously, and I was just plugging away at this. Every spare moment was spent refining this process. And I started to put out resumes, started to interview, using my framework that I developed with the help of these people who were generous, recruiters and hiring people. And within six or 7 months, I landed a role that bumped my income up by $50,000. So it was way above what I'd set for myself. And that really was the start of the journey, because the people around me, friends, family, colleagues who knew the rock bottom I had hit and then where I catapulted myself, started to come for help. They said, how did you do that? What was the framework? How did you land this role that bumped your income up, and so on and so on? And so I started to help other people. And that's how the business actually started. And I launched myself into a very successful corporate career and had the side business of coaching people to advance in their career, to land, better incomes, or to transition into careers that they really wanted to do if they were dissatisfied with the ones that they had. And that success rate is what has led me now to do my business full time. So I left corporate really during menopause. That was the turn for me. I was working in very high-powered roles at that time, long hours. Menopause hit, and there again upended my life because I was unprepared for it. It was supposed to happen in my 50s, and it came at age 45. So that is how the journey for me started, and that's why I do what I do today.
So let's expand on that. What was happening when you hit menopause that kind of changed everything for you?
I've been through a lot in my life. I grew up in South Africa during the times of apartheid. That was a difficult environment. I've experienced other challenges, and certainly the one when the relationship ended was a challenge. Somehow I got through those. And then menopause came along, and I don't know if it was because I was in some kind of denial about it, because I was very unprepared for it. In my mind, it was supposed to happen when I was 55, 52, 55, whatever. It comes at 45. I'm not prepared for it. I'm working a very busy, high-powered role. I'm working 10 hours a day. And this thing comes along, and suddenly I'm not sleeping. So the insomnia was one of my key symptoms, severe insomnia, mood swings, hot flashes. And some of the hot flashes start happening in these corporate meetings. And I'm in a room with men mostly, because at that stage, I'm one of the rarities, right? Back then, I'm one of the rarities in terms of the only woman sitting in C-suite meeting rooms, executive meeting rooms. And, I'm sweating. The blouse is stuck to my body, and I'm uncomfortable. And what happened for me with severe menopause symptoms was often when a hot flash would hit, I'd get severe nausea as well. So often I had to dash out of the room. And I think it just got incredibly uncomfortable, all those symptoms. And I decided, you know what, I'm at the stage, my daughter was grown, she's starting to form her own life and her own career. And I was like, I don't need to do this anymore. What is it that I really want to do? And I started to have a look at my life and what was the thread that always brought me joy. And the thread that always brought me joy was writing. So I've written, even when I was in corporate, I did a lot of writing. I wrote a lot of project communiques, business copywriting, all of those things. And I was like, I really love telling people stories, but in a way that helps them get what they want. And that was obviously my success in terms of resume writing, LinkedIn profile writing, cover letter writing, and then coaching people in interviews. And I was like, I enjoy this so much more than I do corporate. Because at that stage, I'd been in corporate for 23 years. I'd achieved a lot of the goals I'd set. The only thing I really loved about corporate at that time, as I was approaching menopause, was managing people and growing people and working with people. I was not turned on by the technology or any of that, even though I ran a lot of tech programs and so on. Other people, the experts, did all of the nitty-gritty. I led the people, and that was the side of it that I really loved. So I always really loved working with people, and I started to notice that there were two threads. One was the writing thread. The other was my love of working with people and helping them grow, whether it was growing in corporate or whether it was growing in their career. And so I made the decision to leave. I was like, there was a catalyst. There was an event that actually brought that to a head. So it was menopause going on. I lost one of my favorite uncles to cancer during that time. And I was attending his funeral, and my phone was blowing up. My boss was sending me messages wanting something from me, even though she knew that I was going to be away for that day attending a funeral. And I think it was something that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I was like, I don't enjoy doing this anymore. I'm being harassed or bothered by someone who wants something from me, despite my communication. And I went back on the Monday, and she wasn't very empathetic. She said to me, I've tried to reach you all Friday. And I said, I know, but I told you I was attending the funeral and I wasn't going to be available. And she responded with a very strange comment, which was something like, I'm available to this project 24/7 was her response. And I don't know, something in the brain just snapped. And I said, well, I'm not. And I resigned. And that was the end of it for me, So it was that particular catalyst. And I think it was that combined with, I don't know, there's something about menopause where your tolerance for certain things becomes less and less. And as a woman, you're starting to become aware that it is very important to find your voice and very important to start taking care of yourself. And so that's where a lot of things changed for me. My health journey changed, my movement journey changed, all of that, you know. And I was like, I'm going to do something that I love doing that can contribute to others, where I can earn good money from, and where I'm going to be happy doing what I do. Because look, we spend, 9, 10 hours a day at work. May as well be happy. So that became one of my missions, was to try and help people be happy in what they did. If you're going to spend 10 hours a day somewhere or away from your family, kids, whatever, you need to be happy as you can be. You're not going to be happy all of the time, because certain corporate decisions happen and you may not agree with it. And sometimes you're under deadline pressure and so on and so on. But fundamentally, wherever you can be happy, try to be happy.
Well, I've heard similar stories to yours from quite a few women, whether or not there's just been that final straw, or they've been working under a manager that they just, can't handle. They're calling them at all hours on the weekends after work, and they decide that they do want to leave, but they often feel like they don't have a lot of choices, or they're not sure what to do next. So if there are people listening in that are kind of, potentially in that situation, how do they transition into finding another role, or a role that makes them happy, when they feel like they're kind of stuck in the role they have due to, money constraints, or it's the only career they've ever had?
So I have a process which I do with every client that comes to work with me, and it's called Mining Your Story. And it's actually on my website. It's a free resource. And I start there with people. So we go through the patterns and the threads of their stories from the time they're quite young, because often your pattern or your thread, that is the thing that really inspires you, shows up at quite a young age. But, as we grow up as adults, we become responsible. And so we don't always follow that voice or that thread that's showing up. So for me, it was writing. If I use myself as an example, I always knew I wanted to write. In my head, I was supposed to be a novelist. But, you go on, you have relationships, you get responsible in your jobs. And people always told me that there was no money to be made in writing, right? So I pursued the corporate career, and I was good at it, and I did well. But what I noticed when I actually did my own Mining Your Story process, I went through this whole exercise of identifying patterns, where I was happy, where I knew I was contributing. And then I was like, okay, how can I turn this into something that's going to benefit others? Because within every person, there are threads, there are things that you're naturally good at. But a lot of people don't recognize that, because it is so automatic for them. So they go, oh yeah, but I just do that. Well, sometimes what you're just able to do is a gold nugget for someone else. And so that's one of the first things we do, is we identify the gold nuggets. And that's why I call it mining your story. So you're mining your story for the gold nuggets of your own talents, the things that people come to you for advice for. Like, what is it that people come and ask you a lot about? That's another gold nugget. All of these things, as you mount them up, they become a strong list of transferable skills, which can go into almost any industry. What people get confined by is their job-specific skills. And that's why a lot of people feel like they're trapped, like they can't move from one career to another. But if you start zoning in on some of your transferable skills, that's where you start to identify the skills that can go across numerous industries. There's things like leadership skills, like team mentoring skills, like multitasking skills, problem-solving skills. The key is you need to learn to frame that up in a way that's going to be beneficial to someone else. And that's where people struggle. Like, not everybody is a wordsmith, so they don't know how to frame up these hidden skills, or these transferable skills, or these soft skills, as they're known in the corporate world. And so they keep zoning in on the job-specific skills. But if you want to change careers, you can't zone in on job-specific skills. Because if you want to move to a different industry, then what's a job-specific skill in banking, for example, is not going to be the same as in information technology or digital transformation or any of those things, right? And so it's about identifying the transferable skills. That's the first thing. Second thing is learning to frame it up. Now, if you struggle with that ability, well, then you go and look for help from a resume writer or a career coach or a copywriter, someone who's good at selling stories or branding you. And then, of course, the other key thing is to get really good at selling yourself, which means you've got to get super good at interviews, because that's where you sell yourself, right? I don't go into interview spaces with my clients. Obviously, I can't do that. But what I do is I practice with them and I help them frame up their answers in a way that's going to be beneficial always to the person that they're going to find the job with, right? So whether it's a client or a company, they need to be able to sell themselves, which means here's the other part that you need to get good at is research the companies that you want to work for. Identify what their key message is, what their key mission is, what their key goals are, and then frame up your experience to sell into that. So it is a process, and many people don't go through that process. So then they get stuck and they go, I can't do it, I can't move. But you can, because everybody has transferable skills that's beneficial to someone else. You need to take the time to identify it, and you need to take the time to learn how to frame them up, and then you need to take the time to learn how to sell them. Those are the 3 key steps. And once you get good at that, you can literally do it across any industry. And that's what I've seen. And it is time and investment. Sometimes it's not a monetary investment. Sometimes you can work with someone, a partner, a colleague. But I think if you want to gain the best out of it, then you need to work with an expert, someone that's, it's like when people are coming to you, they're coming there for their mind and their well-being. So we can't always, because I don't think we see clearly when we're stuck. We don't see clearly what the road could be. That's where you need the expert. You need the coach. You need the Pilates coach to transform your body. You need the food coach to help you eat better. You need the career coach to help shape up your career so you can actually sell yourself and go get the one that you actually want. So it's about that. It's about changing mindset and understanding that you are worth investing in, whether it's time, whether it's money, energy, or all 3 of those, right? You're worth investing in if you want to grow.
Mm. Well, I agree. And I think, even as you were saying at the start about your transferable skills, a lot of people don't recognize their skills. It's only when they start, saying what they do and other people highlight to them, well, yeah, that's a skill and that's transferable. And then you actually realize, oh, yes, I've been in this role for 10 or 20 years and I do have a full list of skills, but you just haven't realized what they are until someone else has pointed them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find we women in particular, we tend to suffer from imposter syndrome more than men. Guys will recognize their achievements and their great skills very quickly, and they don't mind selling it to you either, right? Women tend to struggle with that. And I don't know if it's because of societal norms that's placed on us from a young age. We kind of have to be demure and in the background and not say too much, all of these things, right? I mean, things are improving as time goes by, but certainly I know I wasn't raised like that. It's like children should be seen and not heard. Don't brag and boast about the things you're good at, right? But when it comes to your career, that is one mindset that has to be shifted. You do need to brag and boast about what you're good at in a tasteful way, obviously. You don't become one of those cocky, arrogant people, but you need to understand what you're good at, where you can help, how you can help, and who you can help. And if you learn to frame those messages and shape them up, then you become a candidate that's sought after, And so that's what I try and help people see is the talent within themselves. And that fundamentally is the coaching that I do. Because you're right, people do come and they go, but I didn't think that was a transferable skill. Well, that's why you need to work with someone that can actually see that in you. People Coaches, if they're good at what they do, they see you bigger than what you see yourself, and they help you frame that up. I certainly didn't get to where I was without the help of others. I often talk about my mess, which I alluded to with the breakdown of the relationship, the financial mess I found. I didn't get to my success without the help of other people, without going to pick those people's brains, asking them for 5 minutes of their time, taking them out for coffee and trying to find out what works. Right. And it's so you've got to go to the ones who are where you want to be. Seek your advice and your mentorship from people who are where you want to be. So if someone wants to have a strong, fit, and healthy body, they come to someone like you because that's what you do, and you are where they want to be. A lot of time we tend to listen to the advice of people around us, sometimes family members even, who are well-intentioned, but they haven't walked the journey, right? It's kind of like, are you going to, there's an old joke I always say to people, are you going to ask advice around finances from your broke, drunk uncle? No, you're not, right? Because that's not where you want to be. You don't want to go backwards. You want to move forward. So you're likely to go ask for financial advice from someone who's succeeding in finances where you want to be. And that's a smart move. And so I always encourage people to try not to take the journey on their own, because it's a longer journey. I found that when I went through that time, I didn't have the money, to be honest, because my house sold at a loss. I was $50,000 in debt, and I was pregnant, and I was about to go on maternity leave. So there was no spare money. What I did was I sought out a couple of coaches and sought out those other people, the hiring managers and the recruiters. The coaches who were charging, I asked them what their fees were, and then I saved for it. And that meant that for months at a time, there were no dinners out, there were no movies, there were no coffees out, right? Unless I could take someone have a coffee with them in the corporate kitchen, because that was free, right? But you'd sit at the little table and you'd pick their brain and ask for information. So I did what I had to do to save to be able to afford that fee. And then I would undertake coaching or support or help for about 6 months. And I constantly was learning. But for me, I realized that what I wanted was the $20,000 extra, which means I had to save my money to be able to afford the coach that could help me get there. And that's sometimes what it takes. It does take a level of sacrifice. It does take a level of looking at what you really want to achieve, and then investing, saving. And if you don't have the money immediately, saving to invest, or finding ways to do it so you can continue to grow. It's all about growth. And the same applies to career growth. Nothing comes without a price. And even if the price isn't money, it is always energy and time. Without a doubt. A transformed body requires time and energy. You have to actually get up and do your Pilates exercises. You can't say, I wish I had the body and I'm going to follow Kate, but you don't actually do the exercise, right?
Well, that's it. Well, experts are always going to get you there faster and quicker. As you said, it is an investment, but if you're getting those results quicker, and even in the job space, if you get the results quicker and then you get the job you want, then you're making the money, it's the investment's been worth the while.
Absolutely. Well, for me, it was like, okay, I had to sacrifice coffees, dinners, movies, all of the things I love. And I would make my friends come to my house. Like, when the baby was young, I said, listen, I can't go out with you to dinner. First of all, I can't afford a babysitter. So you can come to my house. We can cook food together, whatever. But in the end, I invested whatever. I think at the time it was probably $1,500 for the coaching that I needed. But I landed a job that paid me 50 grand more within 6 months. So that investment was definitely worth it to me, right? And this is what a lot of people don't realize. Sometimes they don't. They think in terms of, oh my goodness, I can't afford it right now. But then, okay, work towards affording it, but think of what it can bring you. what it can bring you in terms of your career. If you get even 10 grand more or 20 grand more, and you've invested $1,000, that is definitely worth your investment, right? Because once you catapult to that level, you're going to continue to catapult to the next levels, and you'll end up with, 75,000 more than 2 years later, and 100, and so on and so on. I went from, a 5-figure income to high 6 figures very, very quickly. But it didn't come without its sacrifice, as I've just alluded to. It didn't come without its sacrifice. And working my social life different for that period of time to be able to do what I needed to do. And I've had a great time with my daughter. My daughter has seen the world. We started traveling. I got a really great role with a company that had me travel back and forth to Sydney. So she was on a plane with me, very young. The company supported my mother going with me, right? And so I was able to fly and travel with my daughter. And then we started traveling around the world. My kid was seeing the world at a very young age. But at the time when I was going through the absolute mess, I couldn't see the wood for the trees, because sometimes you do have to give yourself that moment to panic. I did panic. I'm just very honest about the journey. I'm not going to tell you that it was all unicorns and rainbows, because it wasn't. But because I made the sacrifice, because I figured out what I needed to do and did it, more importantly, because you can figure out what you need to do, but then you can also stop right there and not actually do it. And so I made the sacrifices and did what needed to be done, and ended up within a very short space of time getting rid of the debt and starting to travel and starting to live a life that, when I was going through that hard time, I couldn't see the possibility of that. But it did turn around, and I've done a lot. Even my career coaching, I've sat on the steps of the Sacre-Cœur in Paris coaching clients, because that's what I set up in the end. I love traveling. Traveling is my big thing. Aside from writing, it's another passion. Traveling is a passion. So I travel with my work. I work from anywhere in the world. Was in Thailand earlier in the year and talking to clients from Thailand, because I'll always make myself available, especially if someone is going for a really great job and they need that interview support. I make myself available, even if I'm traveling. The writing you can do from anywhere, and you work it via email and so on. But sometimes a client will get in touch with me. All of my clients get in touch with me via WhatsApp. And so they go, you know what? I just landed an interview. I'm scared. I might be overseas, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to fit you in. And I fit them in, and we go through the practice, because my aim is to help him get the job, right? So I'm flexible around how I work, but it was all set up with deliberate action steps, And I think a lot of people try and avoid the action steps. I certainly did for a time, until I realized I'm not going to get the life I want if I don't take the action. I actually have to do the thing, whatever the thing is that you need to do. You have to do it. And the thing is, it does get easier. The more you do it, it becomes automatic. It becomes easier. And I think that applies across the board, whether it's your health and well-being, whether it's your career growth, whether it's your financial growth. Consistent action, even if it's tiny little steps every day, lead to something.
That's something we definitely always talk about on the podcast, is just taking one step at a time. And for people that may be listening in, women that are maybe, in their 40s or 50s or even 60s, and thinking, oh, I'm just too old now to try to change careers, and maybe they have a perception that there's a bias out there against hiring older people that are, not sort of right at the start of their career. What advice do you have for them?
Well, I could say that bias has changed. Certainly it existed. I won't say that it didn't exist. And I've worked with people around that age discrimination and how to get past it. But things have changed, especially since the pandemic. Things have changed. A lot of people are still emotionally shell-shocked from being isolated. So what I'm seeing in the workforce now, and particularly in the last 18 months, is that companies are hiring more for EQ skills, so emotional intelligence skills, with the understanding that they can teach job-specific skills, but they want people who have the EQ skills, which means that many of them are focused on hiring older people now, because those of us who are I'm in my mid-50s, 57 years old, right? And a lot of the people I work with are my age or older. We have been through the war wounds of corporate. We know how to navigate difficult times. That only comes with experience. It is not always something that younger people coming out of grad school can manage and handle. And so we're there to come in and mentor these young ones and help them gain the resilience. And so I'm seeing companies move towards hiring older people, understanding that they come with that certain emotional intelligence that is far better on projects that are going pear-shaped than inexperience. So obviously there's a few ways. One of the things you need to be open to as a midlife careerist is you need to be willing to report to younger managers, because some of them are younger. And that's often a question that trips people up in interviews, right? So people will ask you, how do you feel about reporting to a younger manager? And the standard or good answer is always, I'm here to bring my experience and I'm here to learn and grow as well. And so I believe the younger generation can teach me something, especially in certain spaces, like they're particularly good at the TikToks and the social media and the technology, right? And then you say, but this experience I bring is around keeping level heads during challenging times. And on every project, there is not a project that I've ever worked on when I was in corporate that went to plan. They never go to plan, right? Something always goes wrong, whether it's the timeline being blown, the budget being blown, whatever. And when you've had experience of years of working on projects, you actually learn to navigate that really well. You also have built your collateral of relationships in your industry. So that means you can pick up the phone and you can get something sorted out, right? And so those are the kinds of answers you frame up. You allude to your experience. You are open about saying that you don't have a problem reporting to younger people, that you're there to learn from them, but you're also there to pass your knowledge on. And then I've seen questions where people go, well, you at that age, aren't you thinking about retirement? And you can say, well, no, I'm not. I want to be a contributing person in society, in the community, in the workplace for as long as I can. I have no plans to retire, And even if I get to retirement age, I still want to be working part-time, because that's what stimulates people. I mean, we all know that a lot of us, if we're looking at things like dementia and Alzheimer's, there's a connection between not being connected and those diseases showing up, right? And so a lot of people are now approaching going, you know what? I want to be as active as I can for as long as I can. Active with my health, active in my community, active in the workplace, active with my finances, active in traveling, whatever, exploring the world. People aren't settling into, oh, well, I reach a certain age, that means I've got to go out to pasture and retire. That's not the mindset anymore. And a lot of corporate recognizes that. So they're trying to make places, because they understand that people who have been in the workforce longer have got a certain level of knowledge that's very valuable now. And so, yeah, my answer to people is no, don't think like that. Understand that the world is changing. I mean, my partner is in corporate, hires for some big, big programs in the technology space. And he says, I love my gray hairs. That's what he called them, gray hairs, right? He goes, I love my gray hairs because they come with a certain experience and they're able to stay calm during troubling times. And if you're delivering any kind of technology program, you do hit troubling times. They don't go smoothly all the time, and you need to have that older, calmer person who can mentor the young one who's coming through saying, oh, panic, it's gone wrong. And the older person goes, no, I've seen this before. Here's how we approach it. Here's how we get around it. So it's a mutual learning that can happen between the younger generation and the midlife generation and even the older generation. And I'm definitely noticing that that is the conversation going on right now. So if people want to get back into the workforce, they want to contribute at this stage of life, then do it. There's a spot for you. You know, I work with a lot of people at that level. A lot of my clients are not younger clients. They are the midlife careerists looking to change. And I see them land the roles, and I see them thrive in the roles, and I see them contribute. And that's a wonderful thing to notice, because I'm a midlife woman myself. I like to know that we can do things, we can still contribute, you know, we valued.
And for women that have maybe taken a break from the workforce, you know, having kids, and so they've been out for, you know, a period of time, and maybe, you know, the roles they were in previously are no longer there, or the skills required for those roles are completely different, you know, further down the track. What advice do you have for those women that are maybe looking to re-enter, but after a long break from the workforce?
Well, it goes back to the story again, the mining your story, because as a mother, there are so many things we're doing all the time. We are multitasking in every way, shape, and form. And those are valuable skills. And so it goes back to looking at the thread, looking at some of the things, because, you know, some mothers are running the household, managing the finances of the house, making sure husband's life is ordered so he can be out there working, and raising the kids, doing the whatever run they're doing, the sport run, you know, they're doing mothers groups, all of these things. So they're multitasking all over the place. And there's a way to frame up and shape up those stories as well, so they become valuable, because anybody who's doing that is project management 101, right? You are project
Yeah.
managing the house and the children and the husband and the relationships, the community relationships, as in the family. You know, some women are even caring for aging parents while they're raising the kids and doing everything else. So you project managing 101. There's a way to frame up that story too. And so I try to help women see the value in everything that they do. And the only recommendation I would make to women is, if you're deciding the direction you want to go, have a look at a couple of short courses that you could do to skill up in an area, for example. So, for example, if you wanted to become a social media expert, right? If you're someone that's on LinkedIn and you have the LinkedIn Premium membership, there's a lot of free training that comes with that. And LinkedIn Learning is recognized in the workplace. So that means you don't need to go to uni and pay an exorbitant fee to get skill up. You can go and do one of LinkedIn's certifications in social media marketing, right? So while you have those moments where you're raising kids, if there's times where there's a little bit of free time, or even if it's at night, upskill. Take a course that's not going to be months and months of study, but that's going to be potentially a couple of weeks, or in some cases hours, and you gain something in the area, but focus it on the area that you actually want to go into. Because some people just go, oh, I might do a course in AI, because AI is now the big thing at the moment, right? But it's not something that inspires them. They get into AI, they find that they're bored with it, doesn't do all that they wanted to do. Not everybody's using it in the way it needs to be used, and so people become frustrated. So don't go after the thing that's the popular thing at the moment. Look at your own story and identify, back to mining your story. Mine your story for what is of interest to you, for what comes naturally to you, for what you know is going to bring you joy. And then look at, okay, these are the things I've identified. Where do I need to upskill? Right? And find effective and inexpensive ways to upskill. And you can do that while you're on maternity leave, while you're raising the kids. You know, if you find a course that's only a couple of weeks long, for example, then you're only doing maybe 1 hour in the evening, 2 evenings a week. It comes back to that sacrifice again. There is a bit of sacrifice involved, but it doesn't have to be humongous sacrifice. It can just be a little bit at a time. There again, small actions. What is the small action that I need to take to direct myself into the career that I want? The other tip I give people is go and list your top 20 companies. That's an exercise I do with most of my clients. You don't want to end up in a company that you hate working for. So you may as well go, okay, what's my top 20? If someone could wave the magic wand, what are the top 20 companies I would be really interested in working for? And once you do your research on that, you might find, there's only actually 10. Those other 10 don't align with my mission. Some of what they're doing I don't really like. And you look at their social enterprise and maybe they don't have one. And so you go, no, it's not for me. But I always start with 20. I say, go and identify your top 20 companies. You may find that you have top 15, or you may find you only have top 10, but then start to look at those. And then one of the ways we start building connections is I use LinkedIn a lot. LinkedIn is gold for building connections. And remember, most of the prime, juicy roles exist in the hidden job market, which means through the networks. That's why network building is super, super important. And I'm very big on teaching my clients how to do that, because that's how I built my career. Back in my day, there wasn't a LinkedIn. I had to go to in-person meetups and talk to people. I had to invite people for coffees and lunches and all of these things and build the networks that way. It's a lot easier to do in this time, with LinkedIn and digital platforms and things like that. But build your networks. Once you identify your company, then you identify your people in the company. Okay, these are the top people. These are the HR people. I should probably start following these people. I should probably start looking at what they post and like their posts and comment on their posts, because people remember you. I mean, every client that comes to me, if they have commented or done something on any of the posts that I put up there, I immediately recognize their name as soon as they send me a message. And they go, I saw your video on this, that, or the other, or I saw your post, and I'm wondering how I can get some help from you. I often recognize because they've engaged with me. So become good at engagement as well with the people that you want to potentially maybe land a job with, right? There's a strategy to all of it, but you don't want to be sleazy in your strategy. So like people's stuff, be of a giving mindset first. The more you give, the more you're going to get, right? So even if you give just by sharing someone's post, I like this particular post, I'm going to share it with my network, or I'm going to share it with a few people. People remember that, and doors open because of simple actions like that. It's happened for me in my life when I even had some of the people that used to report to me when I was leading PMO spaces. I had staff of 7, 8 people or whatever. And I've had them move on to other roles, and I was always helping them grow their career, always opening doors for them. They would go on to other big projects, and then they would contact me a couple of years later and go, hey, we need a PMO leader here. Do you want to come work here? And I'm like, wow, I didn't expect that. So these are people who were subordinate or who reported to me, but they found me some of my gigs. Once I built that framework that I spoke about, I never job hunted again. Jobs always found me because of the network, because of the people that I helped. They would then go, we know the PMO leader for you. They would say to their companies, I'd land an interview, chit chat with the manager. Sometimes it'd be an informal coffee, and then I'd get offered the job and I'd work with that team again. So you don't know where your opportunity is going to come from when you develop the skill of building networks, but also building people. Build people, contribute to people, give to people, whichever way you can. Doors will be opened. And you can do it whether you're coming back off maternity leave, whether you're coming back off, or whether you're changing, in midlife and you're going, I think I want something different. I've done this for 20 years. I'm bored. I don't like it. Or it's too stressful for that stage of your life. because for a lot of women, that midlife menopause, it's very, very stressful. So they need to temper back. They need to potentially go to a 3-day-a-week job, or they need to do something that's not demanding 10-hour days from them, because rest is required during menopause. Taking time out for yourself, eating healthy, moving healthily, all of that is required during that time. If you don't give it to yourself at any time during your women's journey, you definitely need to give it to yourself during that time of life.
It catches up with you, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It absolutely does.
Now, I always like to ask my guests that if there's one piece of advice you could give our listeners that they could go off and instigate straight away after listening to this podcast, what would it be?
Well, it's what I said in the beginning. Go and dig into your story for the gold that exists in you, because it does exist in everybody. Now, if you need the free resource to do it, it's on my website. There's a guidance, and I give examples, of mine and how I identified mine, and then a couple of clients and how they identified theirs. So you can go do that, but it's important to go and dig into your story, because here's the thing. Once you become really comfortable with the patterns of your life, the interests of your life, the achievements in your life, you're going to be able to craft and shape any story about your professional life or even your personal life, or both. And the key that I've seen that many, many people miss in the career space is they tend to stick with fact-telling information, which inspires nobody. There's an old saying in copywriting, I'm a copywriter as well, and I learned this very young when I was starting on that copywriting journey, was that facts tell, but stories sell. You want to sell yourself, get good at telling your story. And that means you've got to know your story. You've got to go mine the gold nuggets of your story and value it, because there's value in every story. There's not a woman, man, or graduate who's come to work with me where I didn't pick the value in the story. I see it almost as soon as, they mention one or two things to me, and I go, there it is. There's the gold. That's what we're going to zone in on. And that's how we're going to sell you to the world or to the companies that you potentially want to work for. There's value in every story. And so that's the piece of advice, is value your story, know your story, and then use that to frame up your selling points for your jobs that you want to go for. It's all about the story, but it's difficult for people to tell their story when they don't know it very well or they don't value it much.
So amazing advice. I think that's something everybody can definitely, have a think about, especially in relation to their career. And we'll definitely link up your freebie in the show notes. But for anybody that's listening in that wants to reach out and connect with you, maybe follow along, on LinkedIn and that, how can they do that?
So my LinkedIn handle is Wendy Alexander. They'll find me there, and I post something every day. Probably 6 days a week. I post so it's either a written post or it's a video, and it's all free tips on how to excel in your career, how to answer certain interview questions and so on. So that's the best place, or reach out to me via my website, which is happycareerhub.com. And there's an opportunity there to book free 15 minutes with me to have a chat, to see if I'm the right fit for someone, if they want to work with me, or even just to get some tips, on which way to take the direction.
Amazing.
So happycareerhub.com or Wendy A. Alexander at LinkedIn. So that's the handle at LinkedIn.
We'll link them both up in the show notes. So listeners, you can definitely head across to the show notes to find those links as well to connect with Wendy. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing, such a wealth of knowledge. As I said, we haven't really touched on, a lot of this topic before, but it's something that's very relevant for women and people in general. And I think it can be scary sometimes when you are wanting to change careers or not sure, or returning to the workforce. So thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Wonderful chatting with you.